This 9 News Lunch Podcast brought to you by Specsavers, where every eye test includes an advanced OCT 3D eye scan at no extra cost.
The New South Wales Premier sensationally quits.
I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier.
Gladys Berejiklian is stepping down from politics as she faces a corruption inquiry. That news leading this special edition of the 9 News Lunch Podcast. I'm Amy Meehan. Gladys Berejiklian is stepping down as New South Wales Premier and resigning from Parliament altogether. She's made the announcement after it was confirmed she's under investigation by the corruption watchdog. ICAC is looking into whether she was liable to allow or encourage the corrupt conduct of her then boyfriend and former MP Daryl Maguire. Her resignation as Premier will trigger a vote in the Liberal Party, and stepping down from Parliament means there'll be a by-election in her Sydney seat of Willoughby. Ms Berejiklian says she's no choice but to go.
My resignation as Premier could not occur at a worse time, but the timing is completely outside of my control, as the ICAC has chosen to take this action during the most challenging weeks of the most challenging times in the state's history. That is the ICAC's prerogative. Resigning at this time is against every instinct in my being and something which I do not want to do.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison is paying tribute to Ms Berejiklian, saying he holds her to the highest regard.
Gladys is a dear friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. She has displayed heroic qualities as the Premier of New South Wales. I have worked with her extremely closely, and she has always been a vibrant spirit when it comes to our debates, doing the best for the people of New South Wales.
The plan to reopen Australia's international borders has been revealed. From November, fully vaccinated citizens will be able to travel anywhere in the world and complete 7 days home quarantine on their return. But it'll be up to the states and territories to decide when they relaunch international travel, depending on vaccination rates. It means for some states, a flight to Paris could come before a road trip to Perth. There are no late changes to the NRL Grand Final as rugby league officials monitor Queensland's COVID situation. Rugby league boss Peter V'landys indicated the game could be postponed if crowds were to be banned from the stadium. Queensland has recorded 2 new local COVID cases. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk says they're monitoring the situation closely.
The fundamental reason we are not in lockdown is because we do not have any seeding or unlinked community transmission. If we do see any unlinked community transmission, I'm quite sure Dr Young will not hesitate to recommend a lockdown.
Some changes are being made to the Queensland border bubble after the northern New South Wales town of Kyogle went into lockdown. Only certain essential workers with at least 1 vaccine dose will be allowed to enter. Victoria has recorded 1,143 new infections. All Victorians on the state's authorised workers list will now be required to get vaccinated against the virus. In New South Wales, there have been 864 new cases detected. New South Wales Health's Dr Jeremy McAnulty says more than 87% of over 16s have now had at least 1 dose of a COVID shot.
The total number of vaccines administered in New South Wales is now 10.1 million. This is fantastic news. Vaccination rates are going up every day, so thanks so much for everyone in the community for coming forward to protect yourself, your family and your communities.
The ACT has recorded 52 new infections. Hillsong founder Brian Houston has returned to Australia to face allegations of concealing child sexual abuse by his late father. 9 News reporter Kelly Fedor has the details.
Brian Houston and his wife Bobby emerged from a Sydney hotel this morning after 2 weeks in quarantine. The pastor was in the United States when his lawyer was served with a notice to attend court in October, accused of concealing his father Frank Houston's abuse of a boy in the 1970s. Houston has previously said he is innocent, but today claimed he was in Australia simply because he lives here. He also brushed aside a message to followers that he's ready for battle, denying that was about the high-stakes case. In the CBD, Kelly Fedor, 9 News.
A former policeman who raped and murdered London woman Sarah Everett has been sentenced to life in prison. 9 News UK correspondent Brett McLeod reports.
Devastating, tragic and wholly brutal is how an Old Bailey judge described Wayne Couzens' crimes before giving him the highest penalty possible, jail for life. Couzens shook as the sentence was handed down. Wayne Cousins was a serving police officer when he falsely arrested Sarah Everard under COVID restrictions in March before carrying out his sickening acts. Sarah's family said afterwards the world is a safer place with him imprisoned. It's almost 7 months since Sarah died, they said, and the pain of losing her is overwhelming. In London, Brett McLeod, 9 News.
A former secretary at a Nazi concentration camp has been caught after fleeing her nursing home in a bid to avoid trial in Germany. The 96-year-old standing trial over the murder of 11,000 people. The case is seen as unprecedented because she was a civilian worker at the time. A farmer has described the moment a tornado lashed central western New South Wales. About 4 homes in Bathurst have been badly damaged, 3 people injured when the storm tore through. Scott McKinnon has told 2GB's Ben Fordham he had to hang on to his kitchen bench as the roof of his home was being ripped off.
Your feet were hanging out from the window. Finally pulled myself back down. And as I looked out, I see the big pine trees, probably 15-tonne of pine trees, just getting whipped up in the air. They spun off, went out in the paddock. Then over the other paddock there, the cows get spun around. They got chucked around, and then it spun off in the 2. And went back over the hill and back off the 1 and it was gone.
New laws are now in effect, cracking down on nicotine vaping products. 9 News Federal Parliament reporter Lucy Gray is in Canberra.
From today, it's illegal to purchase products such as nicotine e-cigarettes from overseas without a prescription. Until now, people had been able to import up to 3 months' worth without seeing a GP. Vaping advocates believe the changes are a slap in the face to more than 500,000 Australians who use the products. But the Council on Smoking and Health argues it's a positive step to stop children from picking up the habit. In Canberra, Lucy Gray, 9 News.
The head of the Prostate Cancer Foundation says we need to update the national guidelines around screening for the deadly disease. Data shows we're getting better at detecting the cancer, but Prostate Cancer Foundation Chief Executive Professor Jeff Dunn has told 2GB's Ray Hadley there's always room for improvement.
So the current ones are 5 years old, and I can assure you there's been so much change in terms of evidence and treatment in 5 years. The current guidelines are actually poorly understood. 75% of Australians at least don't even know they exist and don't understand them.
A man reported missing in Turkey has joined his own search party. The man didn't realise his family had raised the alarm after he wandered into a forest after a night out. Hours later, the 50-year-old stumbled onto the volunteers looking for him, joining them, only realising he was who they were looking for when they began calling his name. You're listening to the 9 News Lunch Podcast. In finance, the Australian share market is experiencing one of the worst days of the year with heavy losses. The All Ords down more than 2%, shedding about $36 billion from its value. The Aussie dollar buying 72.2 US cents.
Sport.
2 players have switched clubs on the opening day of the free agency period. 9 News reporter Jordan Tunbridge explains.
Mabior Chol has officially joined the Gold Coast Suns, departing Richmond as an unrestricted free agent. The 24-year-old ruck forward signs a 4-year deal with the Suns after struggling for regular senior opportunities. He played 31 AFL games in 6 seasons with the Tigers, missing out on all 3 of their premiership victories. Jake Kelly is returning to his home state of Victoria after 8 solid seasons at the Adelaide Crows. The 26-year-old hard-running defender joins Essendon as an unrestricted free agent on a 3-year deal. Robbie Tarrant, Callum Coleman-Jones and George Stewart are also expected to change clubs over the next 2 weeks. In Melbourne, Jordan Tunbridge, 9 News.
The NRL is closely monitoring Brisbane's new COVID outbreak as the hours tick down to Sunday night's grand final between Penrith and South Sydney. Contingency plans have been made to move the clash to Townsville if it can't be played in front of a crowd in Brisbane. NRL Chief Executive Andrew Abdo has told Today on 9 they could be forced to postpone the game.
As we get closer to Sunday, it becomes much hotter, and so relocation and potentially postponement becomes more realistic. We are watching this on an hourly basis and will continue to do so.
Perth Glory has announced the A-League's biggest import signing in years. Former Liverpool striker and English international Daniel Sturridge has joined for the upcoming season. And an International Boxing Association investigation has found judges and referees were appointed to rig bouts at the 2016 Olympic Games. I'm Amy Meehan. That's the 9 News Lunch Podcast. For the latest in news, Tune in to 9 News at 6 p.m.
Question: who's behind the glasses at Specsavers? Optometrists. Yes, every Specsavers store has qualified, experienced optometrists whose only focus is improving yours. So book an eye test today. Should have gone to Specsavers.